All right, what's going on, everybody? Good morning, good afternoon, depending upon where you are in the world. We are back once again. Huge fight this weekend. Vasyl Lomachenko versus Masayoshi Nakatani. And this is a fight that questions are going to be asked by both men. All right? Both guys have to answer some questions here. This is somewhat of a crossroads fight. Okay? Both guys are coming off tough fights, although Nakatani did win his fight. Lomachenko lost his. But they also suffered injuries. Nakatani had a orbital fracture against Verdejo. And as we all know, the right shoulder has always been a serious issue for Lomachenko. It plagued him in his fight against Teofimo Lopez, and he's coming off a loss, okay? But this is that same shoulder that's been operated on twice. This is that same shoulder that has seemed to bother him since 2017-ish, going into 2018-ish, all the way up into now, right? Lomachenko is 33 years old. Nakatani's 32. Both guys don't have a lot of professional fights, but Nakatani's been in there with some good guys. Obviously, Teofimo Lopez and Felix Verdejo is no slouch. But other than that, his resume seems to be a little thin, right? So you could argue that the last fight he took some damage. It was a hard fight. But Vasyl Lomachenko, this is a guy who's had close to 400 amateur fights, right? So he's had about 3 careers already jumbled up into one. If you were to really look at the entirety of his career and how many fights he's had, the wear and tear, it's unquestionable that Lomachenko, in my opinion, has the more wear and tear. He has the more serious injury because he had surgery twice on that shoulder. And he complained about that shoulder early in the fight and used it as a reason why he wasn't throwing a lot of punches early on. Whether or not that's the sole reason or whether or not Teofimo Lopez had something to do with that because of his jab and his right hand and the way he was applying pressure, it's debatable. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and say that I don't believe the shoulder didn't have an impact in that fight. But I'm also not going to sit here and say that Teofimo Lopez, who had surgery on his right foot after that fight as well, he had an injury too. So we can go back and forth and debate which injury was worse, but Lomachenko wasn't 100%, neither was Teofimo Lopez. So I think Teofimo Lopez's foot injury, his right foot injury, which is the foot that he's going to push off with, right? That's the power foot. That's how he's going to generate power. I don't think he was able to really push off with that foot as effectively and efficiently as he wanted to. So that's why people are sitting there saying, well, Lomachenko took Teofimo Lopez's best shots. Well, I know Teofimo Lopez did hurt him a few times. I think that's being downplayed a lot too. People are saying that the shots Lomachenko hit Teofimo with hurt him, but the shots that Teofimo hit Lomachenko with didn't hurt him. Disagree with that. I don't think that's an accurate description, in my opinion. But nevertheless, what we have been seeing is Lomachenko hasn't been the same fighter, in my opinion, since moving up to 135. And he's even openly said that he's having issues with the size of the guys up here. Had a very impressive win against Pedraza, but had a tough fight against Luke Campbell, Jorge Linares. 2 solid victories, right? But he had some rough patches. Took some damage a little bit in both fights. Got knocked down in the Linares fight. And I thought Luke Campbell buzzed him a little bit in their fight. So Lomachenko, in my opinion, and I think, the data suggests it when you look at a lot of his fights, he gives away, or not, I hate to use that word give away, he tends to start slow, and he loses the first 2 or 3 rounds in just about most of his fights because he likes to kind of lay back a little bit and let the guy come to him so he can get a feel for what that guy's going to do. And then he likes to basically be the counterpuncher a little bit. He likes to try to dissect his opponent's style and look for openings, look for habits, mistakes, and usually allows the guy, his opponent, to come forward and allows his opponent to be the aggressor. He's not too aggressive the first 2 or 3 rounds generally. So a lot of times you will see him on the cards losing the first 2 or 3 rounds. But it was a shock that on my card, he actually lost the first 7 against Teofimo Lopez. Some people gave him the second, some people gave him the 7th. I'm not going to argue that point. I didn't. I didn't think that second round was even close. 7th round, maybe. But I scored the fight 116 and 112 for Teofimo Lopez. But the big thing, as I've said, is I've seen Lomachenko not be the same guy at 135 that he was at 130. He was destroying guys at 130. He was dominating guys at 130. And I think that the size difference, and he's admittedly said this himself, has played a factor against these lightweights. And he even mentioned that he said Teofimo Lopez's bicep was twice the size of his, whatever. Again, it's not a bodybuilding contest, but again, size does matter. That's why there's weight classes. And I'm not convinced that 135 is the ideal weight class for Lomachenko, as talented as he is. Now, the odds for this fight, Lomachenko is a minus 1150, and Nakatani is a plus 950. So these odds are wide. This fight is being looked at by the odds makers as a tune-up for Lomachenko. But once again, this is a guy who's coming off of a loss, coming off of an injury, coming off of a second surgery on that same right shoulder. And if you look at his last couple of fights, this was a guy who was throwing 750, 800-ish punches a fight at 130, right? And a few of his fights at lightweight, he threw a lot of punches. But against Linares, Luke Campbell, and against Teofimo Lopez, his punch output has gone down significantly. And I attribute that to him having issues with the right shoulder, right? And he's also getting hit more because these guys have longer reaches that he's used to seeing in the lower weight classes, and it's harder sometimes for him to gauge their distance, or maybe he thinks he may be out of range, but he's maybe not aware or cognizant of how long these guys' arms are, right? And even Teofimo Lopez, who's 5'8", has a 68-inch reach. Even that 3-inch reach advantage and that 1-inch height advantage, even that size advantage gave him some problems, right? So when you look at a guy like Nakatani, who's going to be 6 feet, right, with a 72-inch reach, okay, so he's going to be giving up 5 inches in height and a whopping 7 inches in reach. And if he can't throw that jab like he did back in the low, at 130 and 126, because that jab has really gone down in terms of output in these last couple fights, right? Particularly at lightweight, right? So if you're dealing with an aggressive guy, that jab is not only a setup weapon, it's not only an offensive weapon, but it's also a weapon that fighters use to fend guys off. Well, guys coming forward, right? He's aggressive. The closest thing to as a fighter, the closest thing for a fighter to his opponent is that lead hand. That's the first line of defense, right? That's not only the offensive weapon, that is the defensive weapon as well, right? So when a guy is aggressive, that jab is being thrown out there to keep the guy at bay. Let him know something's going to come at you. This is the first line, right? This is the first line of defense. And you know, once you get past that, you're going to have to deal with the left hand, right? But you're going to have to deal with that right hand. If there's no first line of defense, then Nakatani, who is aggressive, he may be able to walk in easier than people anticipate. And he might have an easier time because there's not going to be a jab out in front fending him off. You know, and we're going to keep it real here. We're not going to pretend Nakatani is someone that he's not, right? Nakatani is not Sugar Ray Leonard. We know that, right? But Nakatani, in terms of hand positioning, does have a pretty tight defense. All right? He keeps his elbows in, keeps his hands up high, right? Problem with Nakatani is when he does throw his punches, it takes him a little bit longer than it should to pull him back to it, you know, pull him back into the defensive posture, right? So his shots are being left out there a little bit long, and that's why a lot of times he'll get hit over the top. But Nakatani has shown to be very durable, right? He hasn't had that tough schedule in his career like Lomachenko has had. Lomachenko, you know, you can criticize him all you want. I know Lomachenko has a lot of fans who aren't really, or not a lot of fans, but he's got a lot of detractors who love to criticize his resume. But he's got a solid resume. He's been in there with some tough, solid guys. He's had some tough fights over his career. And even the first title fight that he had with Eleno Salido, that was a rough, tough fight. So he's been in some tough fights. Not all these fights have been easy. Nakatani, to my knowledge, even the Teofimo Lopez loss, he was landing some decent right hands in that fight. You could say what you want about Teofimo Lopez not being mentally up for the fight or having some issues, whatever. Nakatani lost the fight. Clearly, I had it, but I had him winning at least 3 rounds, and I thought that he did land a couple of good right hands in the fight, and I think his jab was effective in spots as well. But the thing about Nakatani is he's just so active in there, okay? He's not looking to land the perfect shot. He's got a very pesky jab that he paints his opponents with, going up and down. Even that Verdeo fight, he was constantly touching Verdeo with that jab, you know, on the shoulder, on the chest. You know, he pop the jab in the chest, then pop it right back up to the head. So he's got a pesky jab. This is a guy who keeps touching you, right? Whether or not these punches are always going to be power shots, he's very active, okay? And when a guy is constantly throwing punches, he's going to constantly put his opponent on a defensive, right? So the big opening here for a fighter fighting Nakatani is they have to capitalize on the fact that his hands aren't really always the fastest in terms of pulling him back after he throws a punch, right? So you're going to have to time that. But the problem sometimes is Nakatani punches with you. So even though you're throwing a punch at Nakatani, he could still be throwing a punch at the same time. Your punch may get there first, but this is a guy who's durable, he's tough. So you're always going to have to worry about what's coming back at you, even when you feel as though Nakatani may not be in the best position to throw a punch. He's going to constantly be trying to throw punches. He's not going to stop being aggressive, right? Even when Verdeo hurt him, he came right back. This is a guy that you may make him take a half step back, but after that half step back, he's jumping forward 3 steps towards you. Okay, this guy's durable, and like I said, he hasn't been in as many tough fights as Lomachenko, right? He hasn't been in as many tough fights as Lomachenko. And the thing about Nakatani is he's got a very sneaky, deceptive right hand that he can throw it really straight as an arrow, and he can also shorten it up too in the mid-range. He's got a real tricky right hand. And the thing about Lomachenko, you know, everyone loves to talk about his movement, but he's somewhat repetitive at times with his movement because he loves to go side to side, but he always stops in the middle and goes straight in when he attacks. So he'll go side to side, right? And that's good. That's good from a defensive standpoint because he's not right in front of you. But when he goes on the offense, I always notice he stops in the center of the pocket and goes straight in, right? I noticed that. And also, when he goes inside, he likes to pivot out to his right. So Nakatani, I think, is very underrated with his boxing IQ because he knows how to time guys. if you notice in that Verdeo fight, he was able to time Verdeo pretty well. And, he waited in spots for Verdeo to stop throwing the punch and finish the combination. And then he would shoot the right hand. He was getting that right hand in there from the 5th round on, right? And that right hand is very, very heavy-handed. And the jab is very heavy-handed, right? This guy is just naturally a heavy-handed guy. I get the sense that even though he's not landing on your chin, not landing on your in the vital areas, just because he's so heavy-handed and he keeps touching you, after a while, your body's going to feel that as an opponent, right? And that's what I think happened to Verdejo. I mean, Verdejo, people say, oh, well, Verdejo he was kicking the shit out of Nakatani early on, but he just faded down the stretch. Again, no one wakes up in the morning and says, hey, you know what? I'm going to fade down the stretch. No one wakes up in the morning and says, I'm not going to throw punches for the first 7 rounds. That's something that happens in a fight because of when you look across the ring, that person has something to say about what you're doing in there, all right? No one's going to sit there and say, well, I'm not going to be prepared to go 12. But again, when you're under the lights and you're staring across the ring at your opponent, and if he decides this is what I'm going to do, and I'm not going to let you do what you want to do, then that's going to have an effect on your performance, okay? So because Nakatani kept coming forward on Verdejo, because he was so determined, he never got discouraged. Even when he was hurt, he recovered so quickly, right? He recovered so quickly that the pressure, not only the physical pressure, but just the mental pressure of saying to yourself, I got to continue to work to keep this guy off me, right? Nothing I'm doing is stopping this guy in his tracks. That's going to wear on somebody, right? That's going to wear on someone, not only physically, but psychologically. And then you got this guy who's so big and so heavy-handed, right? He's got deceptive power. When you can knock a guy down with a jab and hurt him that badly with a jab like he did against Verdejo, right? And that right hand from the 5th round on was landing and it was softening him up, right? When you got a guy who can do that, right? That's a dangerous guy. And when you got a guy that no matter what you throw at him, he's going to keep coming. And I've heard some people say, oh, well, eventually someone's going to break him down. But is Lomachenko going to be that guy to break him down, right? You see that one punch knockout guy that's going to break him down. Does anyone think that Lomachenko hits harder than Felix Verdejo? I don't. And then people are saying, well, he's just going to go in there and rip the long torso apart of Nakatani. Okay, so when he's trying to work his way inside and he doesn't have that jab, that effective right hand, right? Because let's see if that shoulder's 100%. I suspect it may not be. And history has told us that fight after fight, his punch output has gone down, right? Second surgery on that labrum, right? You're not going to sit there and tell me that labrum is 100% after having 2 surgeries on it, right? You're not going to tell me that. I have a torn labrum in my right arm, right? It's not the same. It's not the same. Never will be the same. So I know the injury. And I know when you move your shoulder in certain positions, particularly when you pull your arm back, when you throw a hook, or when you're throwing a jab and you're snapping it, and that labrum is just twisting and turning. It's like a rubber band, you're twisting it, right? Repetitively, right? Think about it. 400 fights, amateur, right? 400 training camps, amateur, right? And even though not a ton of pro fights, but jumping right into the iron early on, right? And having to deal with these guys, being in tough fights early on, never really having easy outs, right? In terms of strength of schedule. Always solid resume, Lomachenko. I'm not one of those detractors. I'm going to give him credit. Solid resume, Lomachenko. Definitely going to give him credit for that. But see, Nakatani has been in there with Verdejo. He's been in there with Lopez. Lost to Lopez, but again, gave Lopez a tough fight. Scorecards aren't going to tell you that, but Lopez had a tough time, right? He got hit with a few right hands, and maybe he decided, hey, I'm not going to go in there and try and step to this guy like I normally would somebody else. So the right hand and the constant pressure, and this guy constantly coming forward, right? And even when you hit him, he's just turning his head and he's just snapping it right back, right? This guy is a machine, okay? And he's heavy-handed. And he's not as bad defensively as people say. Just the big thing is he's got to, work on pulling his hands back to his face quicker after he throws a punch. But once again, Lomachenko, 65-inch reach, going up against a 72-inch reach, right? That's going to be a problem. He's going to be reaching up at Nakatani, okay, trying to land the headshots. And if he doesn't have the jab as effectively as it needs to be in this fight, right, if you can't throw the jab like he did back at 126 and at 130, and his jab is very economical, and there's a low output of jabs coming out of Lomachenko in this fight, I don't think there's going to be anything stopping Nakatani from coming forward here. And if you guys think that Lomachenko is just going to walk in without a jab, if you think he's going to walk in and Nakatani's not going to be doing anything to stop him from walking in, you think Nakatani's just going to sit there and go, hey, hit my body, I think you're sorely mistaken. Nakatani, like I said, has a tight guard, keeps the elbows tucked in, keeps his hands up pretty high. He's a tough guy, man. He's a tough guy. May not be the fastest guy in the world, may not be the most athletically gifted guy in the world, but what he does have is conditioning, determination, heart, and he's a smarter fighter than people give him credit for because he punches with guys. He has great timing. He always finds a way to land that sneaky right hand straight up the middle, which is a punch that Lomachenko has shown susceptibility towards. Right? We've seen guys go up the middle against Lomachenko. Right? We've seen Linares do it. Right? So how do I see this fight playing out? Right? Well, it's an old saying in life. Sometimes you're in the right place at the right time, right? And sometimes it could be flipped against you. You could be in the wrong place at the wrong time. Quite honestly, Nakatani's on top of the world right now, right? He's ranked high, right? He's ranked high, and if he wins this fight, he'll probably get another title shot, right? He'll probably get a title shot if he wins this fight, right? So he's coming off a huge win. He suffered an injury in the orbital bone, but I don't think it was as serious as anticipated. To my knowledge, I don't believe he actually had to get surgery on it. It was able to heal on its own. It wasn't serious, right? But he just destroyed Felix Verdejo after Felix Verdejo hit him with everything but the kitchen sink early on in that fight. And then the fight started to turn in the 5th round, right? So he's riding high right now. He's got confidence. I think over the course of his career, he suffered less damage, right? He's 32. He's not young either. But Lomachenko was an old 33 based on the amount of rounds and the amount of fights and training. And that amateur career means a lot. Sometimes I'm not a big fan of guys staying in the amateurs too long because I feel it takes away time from their pro career, right? So my thing is this. I think Lomachenko's jab will not be as active as it was. I think that's going to be a key factor in this fight. That right shoulder, I don't believe is going to be 100%. I just don't. Okay? I think the reach advantage is going to be a problem as well. I can see Nakatani making this fight sloppy and ugly, right? I could see Nakatani coming forward with the jab. I could see him throwing punches but not landing cleanly. But I could see the awkwardness and the aggressiveness and the sheer size and reach, height and reach, and just the sheer determination of this guy keep coming. He's going to keep coming at me. So Lomachenko's used to hitting guys and freezing them in their tracks. What's going to happen when he hits Nakatani with a good shot and Nakatani maybe pauses for a millisecond but continues to come forward, right? What's going to happen? So Lomachenko, who does start slow regardless of who he's in there with. Now, granted, like I said, he's never started as slow as he did against Teofimo Lopez, but I think Teofimo Lopez had something to do with that. But if he decides to start slow, which he normally has been, And he can't stop Nakatani from coming forward. And you're not going to sit there and tell me that Nakatani's not going to land one good right hand at least 2 or 3 times in this fight. Question is, what's going to happen when he lands it against Lomachenko, right? He's going to be punching down, right? When you punch down, you have more leverage, right? When you punch up, it's harder. So Lomachenko's going to be reaching up. Once again, Nakatani's not going to just stand there and say, hey, Lomachenko, come hit my body. Because Nakatani's going to be hitting him as he's going to be touching him constantly when he comes forward. Because that's what Nakatani does. He doesn't stop throwing punches. He throws punches with you, and then when you stop, he continues to throw punches. He doesn't get the memo, right? When you hit him, he doesn't stop punching you. He keeps going, right? You'll be in the middle of a combination, landing your 1 or 2 punches, and this guy's still throwing punches back at you. Okay, so I think this is a tough fight for Lomachenko. Obviously, he deserves to be favored. Whether or not he should be as favored as heavily as the oddsmakers have him, that's open to debate, right? But in my opinion, this is a tough fight that Nakatani can win. Okay, it's not a lock, but he can win this fight. He has a shot in this fight because of the size, because of him being so heavy-handed, because he's not, he's a lot more. He's a lot more skilled from a boxing IQ standpoint than people give him credit for. He knows how to set up that right hand. He's got a good jab. He moves that jab around, right? He paints people up and down with that jab. He'll touch you. He's not looking to land the perfect shot. He'll continue to touch you with that jab, frustrate you, peck, 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 peck. That's going to disrupt rhythm, right? That's going to disrupt rhythm. You get hit enough times, regardless if you get hit in the head of the body, your body's going to start feeling that, right? So I think Nakatani is very live in this fight. And I'm telling people, why not throw a tickle on him? Why not throw a tickle on him? You don't have to break the bank here. You're getting plus 900. Even if you throw 100 on Nakatani, you're getting 900 back plus your 100. You're getting $1,000, guys. $1,000. Even if you want to throw 50, you're going to get your 450 plus your 50 back. You're getting $500 back, right? It's worth a tickle. It's worth a tickle. I'm not sold on the fact that shoulder's 100%. I'm not sold on the fact that Lomachenko is a true 135-pounder. As stupid as that may sound, because he won multiple titles at 135, but I still think against the iron, I think Tank would have been. I would have picked Tank over him at 135. I know that people are going to call me crazy. I would have picked Tank. I thought Tio was better. I even think Ryan Garcia has a shot against Lomachenko. So does Devin Haney. So he fought some good guys at 135, but I don't think he's fought the iron except for Teofimo Lopez. And when he did fight the iron, I had him losing clearly, right? 116 and 112. So he's a great featherweight. He's a great super lightweight. He's a very, very good lightweight. But at this weight, he gets hit more. He throws less punches. And admittedly, it's not the same fighting these bigger guys as it was fighting at 130 and 126. Now, that doesn't mean that he hasn't stepped up to the challenge. That does not mean that he has not had success. But the clock is ticking. I'm seeing slippage fight after fight, right? I'm seeing slippage fight after fight. I'm seeing a guy who is not getting better. He's starting to slowly decline. You got another guy who's on top of the world right now. He's gigantic in comparison to size. He hits harder. I think Verdeo hits harder than Lomachenko. Teofimo Lopez hits harder than Lomachenko. And we saw that Nakatani was able to knock out Verdeo, and he held his own, even though he lost clearly and decisively. Teofimo Lopez, he showed that, hey, you know what? I'm not going anywhere, right? So, given all those factors, like I said, in my opinion, In my own humble opinion, this could be the wrong fight at the wrong time. I don't like the fact that they're throwing Lomachenko in there with a guy like Nakatani, who's going to be it's going to be a tough, rugged fight. I'm not saying it's not a winnable fight for Lomachenko. Don't get me wrong. Don't get me wrong. By no means is this a lock. But I think Nakatani has a shot here, and I'm going to pick Nakatani. And I would not even be surprised Nakatani scores a couple knockdowns in this fight, maybe even a late stoppage. So my recommendation is throw a little tickle on Nakatani. I don't think this is a lock. Either way, I don't think it's a lock, right? I think this is a fight in which Nakatani is very live. So the bet recommendation here is Nakatani. Put a small wager on Nakatani and get that plus 900. And the odds could even get wider. So we're taking Nakatani here, guys. All right, I can't wait for this fight. Make sure you check me out tonight on the Roundtable on D-Style Boxing's channel at 8 o'clock Eastern time. We got a stacked lineup tonight. I can't wait. And Beav is out. Have a nice day, everybody. Thank you for joining me in the chat. Peace out and stay safe. Have a great one, guys.